Amen. Thanks be to God, however you want to go. The revelation of God to Moses, starting now, and then at Sinai with the Ten Commandments, is the central, most important moment in all of the Hebrew Bible. Full stop. It is the center of gravity for all of our Jewish brothers and sisters' lives. Even though it happened 6,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, it's the center of the life of a practicing Jewish person. It is the moment. It is that revelation. And so, there's so many things to talk about in this sermon. So strap in. You didn't miss the miracle of the Vikings game last week. I promise you won't miss it if it happens again this week. No, well, there's just so much I want to talk about. Like, you could talk about how when God calls to Moses, he says, Moses, Moses. And what's Moses' response? Here I am. Do you guys remember the first 4 sermons on Genesis? When Abraham is called, when Isaac is called, what did they say? I am, here I am. And now here, what ends up being God's name? I want to go there. Holy ground. All ground being holy. And the whole meaning of taking away his shoes, or the calling of Moses, and this back and forth God has with Moses, where Moses is not me, man. I'm not up for this. Trying every which way out of it. Including the fact that when Moses accepts that he's going to go to Egypt, he needs some cred. Despite the fact, this is the former prince of Egypt who is now in exile, having murdered an Egyptian guard. He's been gone for decades. So he's under whose authority am I freeing these slaves? And God says, I am that I am. I will be however I will be. I exist that I exist. Or just that most confusing, ambiguous, huh? You're can I get one person to explain this to me? Now it's a little meaningful that it's ambiguous, God's name. There's a thing about names, because names have a power dynamic. Your parents generally gave you your first name. Many people have the conversation when they decide to intertwine their lives with another one, how's our last name going to be? Have you ever made the mistake? Maybe you grew up in a different culture than I did, but did you ever make the mistake of referring to your parents by their names? By their actual names? How much in trouble were you when your parents referred to you by your full name? How about that one? Names have a sense of it. And as I look around, no one's sleeping yet. I usually call someone out just to show you the power of knowing someone's name. Trudy, don't fake it. That's just a taste of what it means to actually have the name. And this is where it's going to go. Because if God says at the end of this passage, this is my name forever, it is worth pausing. And I'm here to tell you, if you spend enough time with this passage, with just the name of God, it can radically transform your spiritual life, whether you're a Christian or not. Now, the name of God, that's written in that spot, in the Hebrew is a 4-letter word. In English, it's Yod, He, Va, He. What we end up translating into YHWH. What we all end up hearing as Yahweh, right? But YHWH, it's 4 consonants. In this time, at this place, Y is not the sometimes Y. It's just a consonant here too. So YHWH, the vowels are missing. This is interesting. There's a lot of mythology and history behind the fact that the vowels are missing out of this, because it gets built upon that this is the proper pronunciation of the name is secret or holy. So holy, in fact, that legend goes that the only time you were allowed to speak it, there's one person, one day a year, the high priest on, and I'm blanking, the Day of Atonement. That's it, Day of Atonement. The high priest would enter into the temple after a month of purification ritual, wearing exactly the right robes, after saying exactly the right prayers. They would then put a rope on his body and send him in, because like churches are kind of like old school temples, or like the temple. Imagine a big curtain that you don't get to see anything going on back here. The high priest gets to enter the temple with a rope around his body, right? Because he enters that temple. If any of the purification rituals didn't work, or they did them wrong, if you enter into the Holy of Holies without having done that, and you're not the high priest, God strikes you dead. So, high priest, and they got a backup high priest just in case, with the rope around it, they got to pull you out. That's why there's a rope around your body. And okay, so Day of Atonement, if you did it all right and you made it into the Holy of Holies, you stand before the Ark of the Covenant, you raise up your hands, and you pronounce the name of God for the redemption of sins for all the people for the last year. Right. You know what, the only other time that you're allowed to mutter the name of God with the vowels and everything? The high priest on his deathbed gets to whisper it into his successor's ears. That's a great transition plan if I've ever heard one. Right? No, there's no way that could go wrong. Okay. Yod, He, Va, He. 4 letters. Y-H-W-H. Don't get me started on Jehovah. That's a whole nother tangent. But I'll say this. The growing belief is that the vowels are not actually present, that it was meant to be Y-H-W-H because of what it represents. If I were to ask you, what's the sound that a dog makes? Woof, bark, yelp, ruff, arf. How do you spell those things? You got a couple of spellings depending on how it goes, but you're spelling a sound. You're not actually spelling a word. If I were to ask you to write out the word how would you spell that? That's just a sound. It's a guttural noise. They believe, there's the strong belief, widely understood, that YHWH is a sound, not a word. And here it is. The Yahweh is the sound of the inhale and exhale. Now, this works beyond just the holy name. I mean, in Hebrew, the word wind, the word breath, not the sound effect, the word wind, the word breath, and the word spirit are the same word, ruach. I would make you all say it, but it's flu season, and I don't need you coughing on the person in front of you. Ruach. In Genesis 1, when nothing existed but darkness and chaos, the ruach of God hovered over the darkness of the deep. Right? In Genesis 2, God is forming the first human out of the clay, and what into the nostrils? What into it to create a living being? What is God? What was swirling over the darkness of the deep? The name of God. In Genesis 2, what is it that creates life in the human? What makes it a living spirit? The very name of God. What comes later in the third commandment? There's a test for you. What's the third commandment? Don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. When I was a kid, all I thought that had to do was swearing. I wasn't allowed to, I don't have the guts to say it from here. But what it really is, if you take this, that the name of God is actually the breath in your lungs, if it's the inhale and exhale, if the name of God is the dynamic force that separates life from death, then don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain, don't take that gift that you are breathing in and out right now for granted. This one glorious life, was that Mary Oliver? She wasn't the first one to say it. It's the third commandment. Christians grab onto this, that the breath of God is the very light, is the name. This ruach, the pneuma in Greek, the Yahweh. When we encounter Jesus, well, the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John says, in the beginning, referencing back to Genesis 1, John 1 ends up saying, in the beginning was the Word. What is word? What is spoken word? But the breath given articulation, given understandable form. What is Jesus but the infinite, unknowable God, but given an understandable form, the flesh and blood, a formation that we could possibly grasp? That is who Jesus is. Take the close of the Gospel of John. I love the close of the Gospel of John because it creeped me out for so long. Jesus shows up, the resurrected Jesus. He has died, been resurrected. He appears before in the upper room with the disciples. And he says, peace be with you. They're all shocked. And it says then that he breathed on them. And I was always so grossed out because Jesus has been dead for 3 days. Did someone give him a Mentos before he breathed on them? But what is he really doing? It's that same Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Commandment 3 spirit by breathing it. It's the inhale and outhale. This is the life that is really life. And it's not a prayer so much as living now, a dynamic force within your very chest. This God revealed in Exodus chapter 3 is incredibly democratic. Because let me ask you, what does a Catholic breathing sound like? What does Protestant breathing sound like? What does atheist breathing sound like? What does Muslim? What does any human being on this world's breath sound like? It sounds like the very name of God. What does a baby have to do? What does every mother who has given birth looking to hear in those first moments? Is it a cry or is it the exclamation of the name of God? If you, like me, have ever sat by someone you loved and had to rack your mind over what was the last thing they said to you. But you know what you heard. It was the breathing. When you're sitting next to somebody like that, who's on their way out of this world, what is the last thing they do? They're breathing. They are proclaiming the very name of the one who brought them into this world. You don't have to worry about your last words. We already know what they are. every world religion. Give me a world religion. Give me a religion that isn't just 5 people on the internet, that doesn't draw you back to this fundamental practice as a way of coming in contact with whatever is bigger, whatever might be fundamental to this very life. How did our previous we have made spirituality and connecting to God so complicated. It's about sunsets. It's about candles. It's about prayers. It's about buildings. It's about dogma or doctrine or being right. In fact, it's just so basic as when our first ancestors, the first humans, when we had to figure out, okay, what separates the living from the dead? And it's that animating force that binds us. When I want to see people scared at a church meeting, I ask, who's going to open us with prayer? I love asking that. You don't have to make it that complicated. If the most basic fundamental prayer is just, you're a little intimidated to sing in our choir, but you got a voice? You shouldn't be. What is the most fundamental praise song you can sing? In fact, that's a good thing to say. What are praises but the breath in your lungs, given articulation, order, and function? Some of us got some serious training, but they're all coming from the same place. They all reach the same ears. This revelation from God to Moses at the burning bush, is the quintessential Jewish story. But I'm here today to share, to believe, to proclaim that this is the revelation for all of us. This is useful for every Christian, for every person who wants to find themselves just a little closer to a spiritual life. You don't need a curriculum. You don't need a bigger book. Try just breathing. And after that, give it let your tongue do the rest. Let your words do the rest. Let the music flow from you. Let this breath continue in and out all of your days until that last praise is uttered. Amen.